this is Wasim and welcome back to my channel Wagon-Pix. Hope you are all doing great. Today's topic is Axios Interceptor in a React application. So Axios Interceptor is basically used for integration of frontend with backend. Okay, so many of you who are new in programming might be wondering how frontend interacts with the backend. Okay, so you might be having some situation where you want to pass some data to the backend for storage, or you want to fetch some data from the backend to show on the front end. Okay, so these are the things which are handled uh, in in this tutorial. We'll go through the points which we will be covering today. So the points which we'll be covering, the first point which we'll be covering is we'll look at how a front end interact with the backend, how the integration works. Okay, so second point which we will be learning is HTTP request and API call. So these are the standard protocol which we follow while we are passing some data or fetching some data. Okay, and this Axios Interceptor is third party library which we will be using into our React code to fetch a data. Okay, so and last topic which we'll be looking at is this will be a practical example. In a React application, we'll build a code, small code, and we'll fetch some data and show this on our screen. Okay, these are the points which we'll be going through today. To start with, how a front end integrates with the backend. Okay, so we will be looking into this. So you are a front end developer and you are building a front end login page. So let us imagine that you are building this login page, and in this login page you have defined a user ID field and a password field and a login button. Okay, so this is for user. So when user logs into your page, he enters his ID and password. So on click of this login button, you are required to perform some task, right? You need to send this user ID and password to the backend, correct? Because backend will look into the database and it gives the signal. So how exactly that happens is, so this happens through HTTP request. So as I said earlier, HTTP request is a standard protocol which we follow to pass some data to the backend or receive some data from the backend. Okay, so in our case, when user enters user ID and password, and when he clicks on login, so at the time when he clicks on login, we are passing this in the form of an object, JSON object, to a backend with HTTP request. Okay, so no need to worry. We will look at these steps practically. We will build a React application and we'll see all the steps, not with login page. We'll see some dummy content to be fetched from the backend. We will see the login page in next tutorial. Okay, so once we send the request, login ID and password, so what backend does is, backend a developer has built a code which gets this user ID and password, and in backend this is checked in the database. Okay, if the user ID and password is valid user ID and password, then it sends a response that this is the user is authorized and you can give him access. So depending upon the response received, as a front-end developer will write a code depending upon the response. If the user is authorized, I will take the user to the next page which shows the data, or if he is unauthorized, if the user ID is not correct, incorrect user ID or password, in that case I will just show a error screen stating that the entered user ID and password is incorrect. So this is how a front end and a back end works. So let us go ahead and build a mini application to fetch a data from a backend. So we don't have any backend code as such. So for this, what we will do is we will go through a test API website. There is a test API website which is called as request.in. So this website provides test APIs which provide using which we can fetch some dummy data. So for example, this is the API request which we need to do, and this is the data which we will get. Okay, so basically what happens is, this is the HTTP request as we discussed. Along with this, when you make a call with this request, we will get a data response data. So here what basically we the backend API is already defined. We just have to use this at the front end. So at the front end, what we will do is, we will use this API and make a call, and the data which we will receive, like email, first name, last name, and the image which we will be receiving, will try to display these content on our web page. Okay, so now let us go ahead and build a code. So I already have a base code over here. For those who don't know how to build a base code, I request you all to go through my previous video where I have already explained how to start the React coding, how to build a base code. So in this tutorial, we have already defined this index.js base file. In this, we currently we are displaying this hello. So let us go and check. So here we are onto our base file. We'll remove this. Let us quickly go ahead and create a new file, that is app.js. Okay, import React from React. Okay, now name of the file, okay, return. Let us put some dummy content to make sure that the component is working fine. Child component. Okay, so now this is the parent component, and this is the child component which we will be importing into the parent component. Okay, so now let us go. We don't want the strict mode. We'll define a div. Okay, so we were into component, and for child we will import see, we have imported a child component. So what we will see is, we will see this parent component content, and then whatever content is present in the app will be displayed below parent component. Okay, let us quickly go ahead and check here. See, this is the parent component and this is the child component. So now we are good with the base code. We'll remove this dummy content. We'll remove this content as well and start with our actual coding. So before proceeding, we need to install Axios into our package. So for that, we'll go to our command prompt. We'll quickly stop this, and I will make npm install Axios. So this is the command npm install Axios to install the Axios package. So before using Axios, we need to install the packages required for this. So here we are, successfully installed the packages. Now we can go ahead and use the Axios package. Axios library in our application. So this is the parent and this is the child, and in child we will define all the required stuff. Okay, so in this next time we need to import Axios from Axios. Okay, and next step is we have div defined. So in this we will start with a title. Title, let us make a heading. We'll name this as user detail. Okay, and let us align all the content at center, text align. Okay, so let us quickly check if this is working fine. Okay, so we need to run the file. We have not initiated, we have not compiled the code. npm start. This might take some time. Here we are, the heading is defined. So now next step is we will define a button over here with the name fetch data. So when I click on this data button, I should trigger that API. Okay, that is what we are going to achieve. So to define a button, I will come down over here and I will take a button. Let us name the button as fetch data. So on click of this button, I need to call a function. Let us name the function as let us name it as fetch data. Okay, so once you click on this button of fetch data function will be called. So let us see. Fetch data is not defined. We'll go ahead and define a function over here. So to quickly update you all, this part is JSX part, and whatever we will be writing above the return part, that is the JavaScript part, JS part. Okay, so the function which is called will be obviously into the JavaScript section. Okay, constant, let us fetch data. This is an arrow function. So guys, if you want a basic tutorial on the JavaScript, what are the arrow functions, how the function is called, you can just comment me in my comment box what all things you want. I will definitely make a tutorial on that. Okay, so now here we have, these are the user details, this is the button, and when I click on that button, we are accessing the function. Okay, so in this function we will start with a try and catch block. To explain you the try and catch block, when I click on the button, this function will be called. So try and catch is something which is used to handle the exception. Okay, in case if we are doing some task and that task fails, or if there is an error in that task, so instead of breaking the entire page, we will show a content in our console that error in fetching the data. So in our case, we will be triggering an API in this try section. Okay, so if in case there is some error while fetching the data, so in that case the entire page will not get break. What we will do is we will display this content into the console. Okay, so to start with, we will define a Axios get function, get, and what was the API request which we were supposed to do. Okay, so this is the API which we need to trigger to get this data. Okay, so here we are. So this is the API which is triggered. Okay, so this get is a type of request which we are doing whenever we want any data from the server or backend. We will make a get request. Okay, there are many different types of request, like get, post, delete, and options. So you can use the you can make a request as per your requirement. So in our case, we are fetching some data from the backend, so we are using this get request. So once the data is received, we will have then block and the response which we will be receiving. Response will be receiving. What we need to do with that response? So once the response is received, we need to store that response into a variable. So in React, we have earlier seen into our use state tutorial, we need a state variable to store the data, because we will be displaying that data on the screen, and that will be triggered on click of this button. So we will store that data into our use state. For this, we need to define a use state. We'll quickly come over here. I will define a constant. Let us name the variable as user data, and to set the data we will use data. Okay, let us make the initial value as null. So we have seen this earlier. This is how we define a use state. So once we get a response, we will store this data into our user state, user data. How that is done? We will just call this will store the data into user data, that is response dot data dot date, because the data is stored in this data variable. Okay, so now we have this. Okay, when I click on the button, I trigger this API, and with this API we are setting up this use state variable. And in this we need to follow one more thing. So now whatever data we have fetched, we need to show that data on our screen. So for that, before proceeding further, we will format the document. Okay, now the document is formatted. The next line below this button, now we have button over here and the title, and below this button we will show the data which is coming from backend. Okay, so for that we will come to the next line, and here we will define a ternary operator. So whenever we have this data, okay, when we have this data, we need to perform some task. So if the data is not there, then I need to show null. Okay, Okay, so here we are in this. Let me check how exactly we will be receiving the data. So this is the data which we are receiving. So first thing we will show is email. Okay, so no, let us start with the ID. Okay, so let us start with the ID. We'll define a paragraph, and in paragraph I will display this kind ID, and the data which is received will be user data dot, what is the value. You need to exactly copy this key which we will be receiving from the JSON data, and you need to paste it here. Okay, if this is this if you change something in this or in this, it will not work. You need to exactly paste whatever is written over here. This is called key, and this is the value for this key. And let us have the next paragraph where we will define a name. User data dot, let us copy the name again. What is the name? Okay, so name has first name and the last name. So first we will display the first name, and then we will display the last name as well. Okay, because we need to display both the names. Dot, what is the last, this is the key for last name. This is the name. Third thing, we will also display the email. The data dot, okay, this is the email which we will be displaying. And at the last we also need to display image. Okay, so here we have defined the data which we will be displaying. To quickly explain you the ternary operator, this is this is how if else is defined in JSX. So this is the ternary. If this is true, or if there is data in user data, then execute these lines of code. If this is false or there's no data, then display this. Okay, so this is how, this is basically an if else which we define in JSX part. You cannot use if else into the JSX, so the JSX allows us to write a ternary operation. Okay, so this is how we have written the code. Let us see if all is good to go ahead with. Okay, so this is how we got the backend request. So to show you what exactly is happening, let us go into the network section. So I will show you again. I will refresh the page. Okay, now inspect element. So always follow this practice. When you are developing an heavy applications or big application, you always have to make use of this inspect element. There are a lot of things which you can do through this inspect element. In this section we will come in the network tab. So network tab is basically used for to see what all requests we are getting or we are receiving. Okay, so in our case, we have defined button. So when I click on a button, so when I click on this button, this function is called, right? So in this function, we are calling this API. So what happens is when I click on this button, you can see, just see here, this is the request which we made. Okay, in header we have this request URL. This is HTTP request which we have done, and this is the status code which we received stating that yes, we have data, and this is the data which we are receiving. And using this data, we need to display this data onto our screen. So what we have done in JSX is we have defined a paragraph, and we have defined user.id. So whatever ID we got, and first name, last name, email ID, and the image. Okay, this is how data is fetched from the backend, and the formatting of this data is set by the backend developer. So however the backend developer sets this data, we need to write our front-end code accordingly. Okay, so hope you understood the topic. And let me know if you have any kind of questions, any concern, or if you want me to make a tutorial on any other topic. Definitely in next tutorial we will build a complete login page, and if the user is registered, then we will see how we can go into the data page. Okay, so hope you got all the points. Okay, thank you for being with me on this tutorial. Bye bye.